Sri Lankan economy is desperately waiting to emerge out of crisis. Soaring inflation, a weakening currency and low foreign exchange reserves have left the island nation of 22 million people struggling to pay for imports of essentials such as food, fuel and medicine and is in dire need of an IMF bailout. The government has claimed that it can bring down the unprecedented inflation levels under control within a year if the country comply with the strict reforms that are to be taken.
Sri Lanka has postponed a round of debt restructuring talks initially expected to be held this week to allow central bank and treasury officials to provide clarifications sought by the country's creditors. Sri Lanka needs to implement budget proposals and reform measures to help stabilize its economy and ensure it does not return to crisis, its central bank chief had said last week. Speaking at a news conference, Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Nandalal Veerasinghe, had earlier said that getting financial assurances, completing the debt restructuring process, and getting the International Monetary Fund approval will be necessary.
If you look at the budget for 2023, it doesn't talk about all these things. It's all about, with the confidence that the economy will be stabilized next year. So what are the next important structural reforms? What are the next important reforms that would prevent us falling back into this kind of a crisis?
Soaring inflation, a weakening currency and low foreign exchange reserves have left the island of 22 million people struggling to pay for imports of essentials such as food, fuel and medicine and in dire need of an IMF bailout. The country is required to restructure its economic fundamentals not just for its immediate future but for the long-term economic goals too.
This is where debt restructuring was important, that we are asking our creditors to share part of the pain. But it's not fair that we are asking them to share the pain on behalf of us. We also have to show that we also share part of the pain.
The island nation formally kicked off the talks in September after securing a preliminary $2.9 billion bailout with the International Monetary Fund, a step on a path out of country's worst financial crisis in a decade. But it needs to secure financing assurances from key creditors including China, Japan and India before the funds can be disbursed. Last week, Treasury Secretary K.M. Mahinda Sirivardhana said that stabilizing the economy remained a challenge and the private sector must perform its role in aiding the government in pulling the economy out of crisis.
The measures that we have taken, we see some stability right now, but the challenge is how we basically stabilize this further and go forward. That's not an easy task. That needs very committed and well thought out reforms and also the committed implementation of the reforms with specific monitoring.
Sri Lanka had earlier set a target of getting board-level IMF approval in December for the planned 4-year program. Sri Lankan officials have also had talks with representatives from China Exim Bank and China Development Bank, which together hold about $4.3 billion in loans given to fund large infrastructure projects over the last 20 years. China is Sri Lanka's largest bilateral lender. Sri Lanka has been gripped by a deep financial crisis this year caused by record low foreign exchange reserves that has left the island of 22 million people struggling to pay for essential imports including fuel, food, cooking gas and medicine.